My two buddies and I went on a hunting trip for bull elk last November, and we were having a great time, to say the least. That, however, soon would change after what we saw on the third day. Now, I'm not one for superstition, and I don't believe in ghosts at all, but what we saw out there really changed my view about those sorts of things. The trip started out normally after we parked our trailers at a camp. We got there a day early before the hunt officially started, so we could settle in and get some scouting done. Only Eric and I had licenses, because Brian didn't draw out this year, but he wanted to come along with us anyway. Brian also brought along his German Shepherd named Lucy, which stayed back at camp with a leash that was connected to a metal spike. The spike was so deep in the ground that I wondered if we would be able to get it out. I asked Brian, and he just told me that his dog was so strong that it had to be that deep. I enjoyed playing with Lucy. She was always excited to see me and would greet me by jumping on two legs and trying to lick my face. Eric, however, was not amused by her. It would constantly yell at her to leave him alone. Anyway, the first 2 days we saw so many cow elk in valleys and on sides of the mountains that I thought for sure we would see some bulls out there, but there were none among them. It wasn't until the third day of the hunt that we saw a bull elk. It was too far away to take a shot at it though, and even if we were able to hit it, it would take hours trying to pack that thing out. So that evening, we decided to hunker down next to some fallen trees, and were able to watch a hillside. While we were surveying the area, Brian spotted a coyote about 250 yards, walking to a small pond of water strangely, as if it was maimed. Eric took out his binoculars to take a closer look, and he started to describe it saying, "That coyote, it ain't right looking. It has a hunch on its back like a bear, and its jaw. Oh man, its damn jaw seemed like it's been broken, and now it's just dropping there like a dead fish." "Let me see those binos," I asked curiously with an outstretched hand. Eric handed them to me. As he did, he seemed to grasp his gun tightly. I took them and looked at the animal and said, "You're right. The thing's jaw is just hanging there. Also, did you happen to notice its hair? It's so long and unevenly dispersed." I then handed the binoculars to Brian, and he looked at the coyote for 1 second and screamed. "Shh! Brian, shut up! We're hunting," Eric whispered harshly. "What did you see?" I asked as I looked at his shocked facial expression. Brian looked at his feet as he muttered, I saw my dog Lucy, but it wasn't her. I don't know what that was. It couldn't have been your dog. When I looked at it, it looked like a dying coyote. It didn't have the large black spot on its back, or your dog's strawberry red sides and underbelly," I said in a plain yet confused manner. "Well, since we ain't gonna see anything out here 'cause you screamed like a baby, I'm gonna put that coyote out of its misery," Eric said angrily as he raised his rifle and looked through the scope. A large shot followed, and we saw the animal drop down soon after. It was a clean kill, and Eric was curious about seeing what was wrong with the animal up close, so he started getting ready to hike out. As he got his stuff together, he said, "You probably just didn't get a good look at it, Brian. Your dog is fine." Brian stood up, and as he brushed the dirt off his butt, he replied, "I swear, I saw my dog, but an evil, demented version of it, with human eyes. But you guys are probably right. There's no way she could have had the strength to yank out the metal stake holding her back at camp." "Well, let's go find out the truth about this animal," I said somewhat excitedly as I started walking toward the dead animal. It took us about half an hour to hike over to it, and we'd lost sight of the animal's corpse as we had to pass through some trees. Once we finally got to the spot where the animal had dropped, there was no corpse, just a puddle of blood. Yet, however, the blood was blackish and very dense. Eric observed the scene and started to scratch his head as he said, "I could have sworn I shot the thing straight through its heart. There's no way it could have just gotten back up and walked off." I had a somewhat eerie feeling about the whole situation, and Brian was still afraid that it might have been his dog that got shot. Eric, however, noticed the trail of blood leading into a dark tree line. Without asking, he started to follow it, and he loaded his gun. As he did, Brian and I were both freaked out and just watched Eric as he went into the forest. He soon went out of sight, and Brian and I could not leave him here, so we waited. I passed the time by taking a skinny stick and poking at the puddle of blood. It smelled terrible, and the aroma hit me pretty hard. So much, so that my stomach convulsed and I threw up. "You okay?" Brian asked as he put his hand on my back. Before I could answer, there was a loud shot that echoed through the trees. And we both looked at the direction it came from. "Must have found the animal," I said as I spit into the grass. As soon as I said this, we could now see Eric, but he was full-on sprinting. "Run!" he screamed as he ran at us. I noticed that he must have dropped his gun because he wasn't carrying it. I was about to ask him what happened, but Brian grabbed my arm and yanked me towards where he had parked the truck. Without hesitation, I ran. We soon made it back to the truck, and my shoulder hurt from the rubbing of the gun strap. I looked back at Eric, who slowed down for nothing. I soon looked behind him, and saw nothing chasing us, so I opened the truck and got in without worry. Eric then climbed in and told me to hit the gas and go. I was so perplexed on what Eric saw out there, and I knew that he hardly ever got scared of anything, so this started to freak me out. I started driving fast back to camp and I asked Eric, "What did you see out there that was scary enough to make you drop your gun?" I don't know, man. That was no damn animal. I followed the trail of blood and it stopped at the base of a tree. And I was wondering how a coyote was able to climb a tree. But when I looked up, I saw this hairy, humanoid creature there. It smelled so fucking bad. Eric went on about how scary that thing was, and how he was done with the hunting trip and wanted to go home. We soon pulled into camp, and mutually decided that we were going home. I started to pack my things, and then felt like something was missing. I then thought to myself, "Lucy, where is Brian's dog? She usually always is so excited to see us back at camp, she can't stop barking and wanting to be set free." As soon as I thought this, Brian started screaming and crying. I ran over to where he was and saw that his dog was gone. However, upon further inspection, I noticed what Brian was looking at. Someone or something had pulled out the metal stake in the ground and strung Lucy up on a nearby tree and had skinned her. Brian just could not stop crying, and Eric ran over to see what was wrong and just stood there, jaw dropped and frozen. He then muttered, "She was skinned alive." There's a bunch of bruising caused by struggling around her neck, where the collar is. "Shut up, Eric. You ain't helping," I said as I put my shoulder around Brian, who had unstrung his dog's body from the tree. "Skinwalker," Eric said in a low tone of voice as he looked into the distance. He then screamed, "It's a damn skinwalker!" I followed his gaze and saw an animal that looked like Lucy, but yet it had human eyes and a sickly green glaze-looking coat of fur. Brian stopped crying and just stood there, eyes locked on the beast. Eric then whispered with his voice quivering, We all run to the truck. On a count of 3. Just leave everything else, okay? Brian and I slowly nodded and agreed to the plan. Okay, 3, 2, 1. Eric whispered sharply and we all took off like a pack of gazelles for the truck. We hopped in, and as soon as we did, we saw the Skinwalker lunge at us and struck the right side of the door with such a powerful blow that it nearly tipped over the whole truck. It didn't stop me whatsoever, and I drove out there faster than I ever could have. After that, none of us ever went hunting again in that area. We never even went back to claim our camping trailers and supplies. It was too terrifying to think that what happened to Brian's dog could happen to us. And that thing would walk around in our skin. Since that experience, I am now a superstitious person.